morning, I'm Julian Reed, and welcome to Today in Parliament.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Janae Noel Ferguson. Welcome to another show. Thanks so much for joining us again today. Now, Julian, when the House met last Monday, parliamentarians concluded debate on the Banks and Trust Regulations Amendment Bill.
That's right, Janaea. The bill has now moved to the committee stage, and later on in this broadcast, we'll take a look at some of the highlights of that debate. But today, however, parliamentarians will begin debate on the Immigration Amendment Bill.
Yes, definitely a big bill that was tabled in the House of Assembly on February 25th by Minister of Foreign Affairs and MP for Fox Hill, the Honorable Fred Mitchell. Now, the bill provides for the publication of an immigration policy by the minister. It also provides for the establishment of an Immigration Reserve Corps and a detention center to be placed on more than one island in the country.
That's correct. And when the bill was tabled, the minister also indicated that it will make way for people not covered by the Constitution to obtain a belonger's permit. And it also has provisions for changes to the immigration fees. And Keishla Adderley gives us some more details of that bill in this report.
The proposed immigration amendment bill will be guided by a sector policy. Notable tenets of the bill include the grant of a residence belonger permit and certificates of permanent residence to a foreign spouse who is widowed, divorced, or separated after applying for a certificate. The proposal also establishes a detention center for persons pending deportation at one or more locations within the Bahamas and the establishment of an immigration reserve. It also addresses who is entitled to apply for permanent residence. If passed, the bill will allow for the grant of permanent residence certificates to minors entitled under the Constitution to be registered as citizens. Additionally, the bill will provide for the grant of a certificate of permanent residence despite legal separation, divorce, or death. It also allows a person living apart or divorced from a Bahamian spouse to apply for a permanent residence certificate. The permanent residency of a spouse or former spouse meantime can be revoked if a surviving spouse or former spouse marries a non-Bahamian. As for Bahamian employers, the bill will specify the penalty for employing persons illegally. It'll also make it illegal to enter into fraudulent marriages. Keishla Adderley for the Parliamentary Channel.
Thanks so much, Keishla. Well, Julian, as you heard, the bill also amends Section 13 of the Principal Act. That means that the Immigration Department can grant a certificate of permanent residence to a person who's not reached the age of 18, but is entitled to apply for registration as a citizen of the Bahamas.
Yes, when the Minister of Immigration and Foreign Affairs first tabled the bill 2 weeks ago, he mentioned that this was something that many had been calling for, including the MP for North Abaco, Renata Curry.
Right.
Now, we know that the northern island of Abaco is believed to have the largest concentration of undocumented people, or those that would fall into that category. And we've got a brief clip of the tabling of this bill right now.
That many people have been asking about this category of persons between 0 and 18. The member for North Abaco, for example, has been particularly concerned about this, which would give a status to people who are not now covered as a result of the constitutional entitlement. And this would provide for that, along with some other amending features of the bill, including an immigration reserve, and to also adjust the fees to make certain the children, for example, of those who become citizens, who are citizens under Article 3.2 of the Constitution. So I think it's quite a comprehensive set of amendments.
That was MP for Fox Hill, Fred Mitchell, who tabled that bill back in February. But Julian, this immigration issue has really dominated headlines from the new immigration policy was announced back in September. And then we saw the rollout of the policy on November 1st. Now, this week we spoke with the Director of Immigration, that's William Pratt, on these matters. And he said this is really sweeping changes to the Immigration Act. And he anticipates that it will improve the quality of life for those that the act impacts.
Belonger residence permit is really helping those persons who right now the Constitution does not provide any status for them between birth and 18 years. So what what was happening is they were simply issued with a certificate of identity, which really is only an identification. The Belanger residence permit now would entitle them to live and work until such time that they are registered as citizens of the Bahamas. So this legislation is a blessing because a lot of people don't understand, but it's trying to provide them with some status and some stability in their status while they wait on their citizenship. As you know, the Constitution does not confer citizenship at birth. So what does the child do between birth and 18 years? So this legislation really would be leveling the playing field because presently, right now, we have other nationalities, British, Canadian, Chinese. They have children born in the Bahamas, and from day one, if they are here on a work permit, they apply for residence permit for the children. This Belanger permit also now would entitle them to work. So, for instance, a child graduates at age 16 years, they still have to wait 2 years before they can apply for registration as a citizen. What do they do in the meantime? This legislation now would grant them permission to work until they obtain their citizenship. Well, I think if they see the benefits that the government is trying to provide, they will have a better appreciation for it. So we are trying to educate. We will continue to educate the public, particularly those who are caught up in this web, that it's beneficial. We are not taking anything from them. We are trying to add to their stability. Well, we as you know, from November 1st, we started the operation, and we've been arresting persons who are without status. Many of the persons who were arrested may have been delinquent in status. Their status have been regularized, and we are not deporting persons who have a right to be here. We are deporting those who don't. Well, yeah, the process also began on the Family Islands. Every island, particularly where we have any major illegal migration problem, particularly Luther, Exuma, Abaco, Grand Bahama, all of the islands were working in sync with us here in New Providence. So every week they out on the road also, or every day they out on the road, their enforcement team, and they're doing just what we're doing or duplicating what we're doing here in New Providence.
Well, one of the important things, Engineer, because so many people mistakenly believe that the policies are targeting Haitian nationals.
That is right.
But he's stressing that it's not just Haitians, it's any nationality, anyone who falls into this category.
And as you heard, Julian, he drew reference to the complications persons experience who are not covered by the Constitution. They might be looking for work when they finish school. They might be trying to get into a college. They encounter some problems because they've never would have had a registration number, no NIB number, nothing like that, no status.
And think about what that could do to you. It really,
exactly.
really impacts your life.
It does.
In a very negative way. But the amendment provides that the Belonger's permit may be granted as the Director of Immigration deems necessary, but it has to be in accordance with the regulations.
That's right, and the amendments also state that the holder of the Belonger's permit can reside and engage in gainful work in the Bahamas only during the term of the permit. We know there are some instances where you have persons who may be, as they call it, working under the table. Now, in addition to that, a section of the bill also deals with marriages of convenience, and it spells out that if you are found participating in a marriage of convenience where there's evidence, where they're able to prove this, I'm guessing, that the provision of the act says that you can also be subject to a fine or imprisonment.
Exactly. And the thing is, speaking about marriages of convenience, I've heard of situations where people for like $1,000, $3,000 selling
I've heard as much as $5,000. So
it's amazing. But as we said, there are consequences for participating in that. Where a person or the new proposed amendment actually allows that where a person is a citizen or permanent resident of the Bahamas and is found guilty of this,
right,
they can be fined up to $10,000, we said.
Yeah.
But it cannot exceed it.
Yes.
Yeah, and they can be subject to imprisonment or both, the fine and or imprisonment.
That's right. And now the act also speaks to police reserve facility and also, not facility rather, but a program, and also provisions being made for more than one detention center.
Similar to the one that the police have.
The police,
which
right.
really works really well
It
and
does,
supports
it does.
the force quite well.
And so we'll see from the Director of Immigration, he explains really how this new reserve program will work.
But there are some changes for immigration fees which will benefit some special categories. I think one of them is retirees who may have retired and they are now on national insurance and they want to continue to reside in the Bahamas. Presently, the fee is $1,000, and so we would want to look on those persons with giving them a reduced fee for permit to reside. The Immigration Reserve would, of course, give us the opportunity to increase our staffing. We are aware of our major illegal migration problem on many of the family islands where we do not have immigration officers posted. Perhaps we could utilize some reserve officers to assist us, particularly when we have boat landing in areas where there are no immigration officers. So the reserve would help us to serve the public more efficiently and effectively. It will be partner up to the police reservists, as they were the oldest in the reserve business. So we would focus on their pattern, and of course, we would do our training as well.
Now, Janita, the Act provides that the Immigration Reserves Program will be only for Bahamian citizens.
That's right, as it should be.
Right, and they have to be 18 years minimum or older, and will be employed for assisting immigration officers in the performance of all their duties, like we said, and he said, similar to the police department, you know.
And the Immigration Department will also be able to enlist as many reservists as they need to assist in the Immigration Department, and they will be required to train for a specified time. So they already have a format in place of how they want this to work. So I'm sure we'll see that being rolled out pretty soon.
And fairly quickly, yeah.
Fairly quickly, as it should be.
Another section of the Act includes a subsection that will deal with harboring illegal people. You know, it says that no person shall knowingly or recklessly or without cause provide housing or shelter of any kind to illegals, and if they're found doing so, they can be subjected to a fine or imprisonment. And that is a big issue too, isn't it?
It really is. We've also seen a number of those instances, even when we had the rollout on November 1st and we had some news teams following some of the immigration officers, we found where some persons were hiding out some of these illegal persons. But Julian, we also heard from the director that this bill is really groundbreaking for immigration. It's expected to do away with a lot of the challenges currently being experienced in the immigration department. But before we go on with this bill, we want to go back and look at some of the highlights that took place during the last session of the House, where parliamentarians debated the Banks, Trusts, and Regulations Amendment Bill.
Absolutely, Janine.
Really
As we
dealing
mentioned,
with financial
parliamentarians-
services.
That's right. They concluded the debate on the Banks and Trust Regulation Act, the amendment, and Minister of State for Legal Affairs Damian Gomez was the person who stressed in his wrap-up that the amendments are a continuation of efforts to secure the financial services sector. Let's hear what he had to say.
There is a need for controls in financial services, and this arises principally from the instability of global financial markets. The financial services sector is principally important to the growth of our nation, and it affects our GDP critically and impacts government's fiscal policy in this Commonwealth and in other countries. Banking regulation and supervision also affects how banks interact with ordinary members of the public, whether they be ordinary families, domestic businesses, the tourists traveling to our shores, or international investors. Bank supervision, Mr. Speaker, affects everyone. Mr. Speaker, we have seen how the recent financial crisis ravaged countries around the world. Giants fell and small and vulnerable economies were economically exposed. In the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, we felt the aftershocks of the financial crisis in our tourism sector. We saw that many jobs were lost in the financial services industry as some banks closed down and others cut back on staff. We saw that foreign direct investment came to a slow crawl, and Bahamians everywhere were suffering throughout our economy. The main reason for this was simply a loss of confidence in the global financial industry. Mr. Speaker, this is what occurs when one doesn't supervise one's financial services providers, whether they be banks, trust companies, insurance companies, or others. A loss of confidence. There's nothing more dangerous to the financial services sector than a loss of confidence. And that is why we constantly seek to improve our regulations and the supervisions of this sector. That is what we are seeking to do today, and by extension, to bolster and strengthen our financial services sector. Mr. Speaker, the Central Bank of the Bahamas is the central regulator in our financial services sector with respect to banks and trust companies. Much of their function in this regard is established in the Banks and Trust Companies Regulations Act 2000 and the Central Bank of the Bahamas Act. These are the two principal acts which empower the central bank to regulate its licensees. There are various aspects of their regulatory function which are constantly in flux as global compliance requirements evolve and adjust to address new and imminent risks that arise during the natural course of cross-border and domestic financial transactions. Therefore, we often see in the legislative agenda each fiscal year many adjustments to the Banks and Trust Companies Regulation Act and to implement international standards and best practices in the sector. It is not uncommon that we see this type of legislative adjustment. These amendments are in no way cosmetic, but rather they serve a compliance function to ensure that this jurisdiction remains one of the most attractive and competitive.
Now, also contributing to the bill Monday evening, Julian, was the MP for Tall Pines, Leslie Miller, and he really spoke about some of the business practices in regards to banking that takes place. We have now where some banks are charging up to $5 to cash a check, but I see right now the House of Assembly is about to begin. We'll of course bring you all the details from Parliament during our next proceedings, but stay tuned to the 1 o'clock showing. Thanks so much.
Fallen in the streets, Jeremiah 49 and Jeremiah 50. In your constituencies, there are literally people falling in the streets. And I don't know what your plans are to arrest them, but the Bible does have some suggestions, which I shall bring to you from time to time. The streets need to be safe again. And we know that in our human strength, we cannot do it all. But with God's help, we believe that more can be done. Jesus is the source of wisdom and strength. In his name, let us pray. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks this morning for another privilege to be in this honorable house. We thank you, Lord, for those who've made the sacrifice to represent your people in all the constituencies of our Commonwealth. We humbly pray that thou will give them unity and concord in the matters to be debated today, so that whether we are from near or far in the Commonwealth, we will understand that in our unity there is strength. Bless our leaders all, the Governor General, the Prime Minister, Her Majesty's loyal opposition leader, those in the cabinet, and those in all the various departments that are seeking to govern this country aright. O Lord, in thy mercy, provide the courage and the strength for us to do that which is necessary to be done to bring discipline and order in the places where it's most needed. Forgive our sins now and bless your leader of this house today, our speaker. O Lord, provide him again with the wisdom and patience and discernment that he needs to direct the affairs. And may all things here today be done decently and in order. We thank you since we offer this prayer in the name of Jesus, who taught us when we pray to say together, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen.
David. Good morning, honorable members. Today is Wednesday, the 11th day of March in the year of our Lord 2015. I'd like to welcome you back for a continuation of a sitting of this honorable house. Before we begin, we would certainly begin with the usual agenda, and we are on second reading and committal of bills. But before we do, we're delighted to have visiting with us in the gallery this morning the Director of Immigration and the Consultant of Immigration, Mr. Pratt and Mr. Nottage. We are also delighted to have some out-of-town guests from Shippensburg University. I hope I said that correctly. From Pennsylvania, Shippensburg University, Pennsylvania, led by Dr. Sarah Grove and Dr. Mark Sackleben. Please stand if you may. Very well. And there's a group of students, Kathleen Lawler, Kayla Zawoski, Andrew Harris, Nicholas McClure, Alexander Eberly. That's 5. Welcome to this honorable house, and I understand this is your second time visiting with us. You're on a mission to learn some things about politics in the Caribbean and political research, and I understand you will be here for a few days. We wish you well, and we invite you to enjoy the festivities and the educational experience here in the Bahamas. Honorable members, let us welcome them. Now to the agenda at hand. I understand we have Rule 49 allows for the minister to make a special communication, and I understand the Minister of Works and Urban Development and the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador has a communication. The chair will recognize him at this time. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. Speaker, while I am ready myself, I just wish to lend my voice to the chorus of your welcome to our special guests in the gallery and join you in urging them to ensure the experiences that they'll have here in the Bahamas to be not only educational, but also enjoyable, and that they assure themselves of getting some of the sand of the Bahamas in their toes. That will assure them of coming back again and again. You are welcome, and hopefully you'll enjoy your stay here. Mr. Speaker, when I stood in this place to give my contribution to the mid-year budget debate, I determined and said that I will bring an update to this House on the project to construct the Bahamas Agricultural and Marine Science Institute, known academically as BAMSI, at North Andros. This communication, Mr. Speaker, meets that commitment. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas, not unlike the rest of the Caribbean, is faced with an exorbitant food import bill because we have traditionally neglected to work towards maximizing our potential when it comes to feeding ourselves. The fact that we also have the added burden of literally feeding our tourism product worsens the whole issue of food imports, as the challenge here is to feed others as well. As a government, we can sing our praises forever. But when it comes to validation, the eye on an objective outsider rings truth. Most recently, Mr. Speaker, the Director General of the International Labour Organization, ILO, Mr. Guy Ryder, in referring to the creation of the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute, BAMSI, said that the Bahamas has gotten that message, has gotten the message, and is on the right track for sustainability. The message, Mr. Speaker, was also echoed several days earlier by the Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, Jose Graziano da Silva, when he urged heads of government at the Caribbean Community CARICOM Summit held here in the Bahamas to strengthen support to agriculture, to contribute to job creation and tourism revenues, and to protect our economy from external price shocks. Mr. Speaker, as it stands, the Bahamas imports more than 85% of the food products it consumes, taking our food import bill to nearing $1 billion. This is a consequence of failure of successive governments to address the circumstance which negatively impacts our economy. When you consider what we have and will potentially lose in terms of jobs and foreign exchange, when you consider that the profits derived from tourism are substantially expended on food imports, there can be no more innovative mechanism to turning our circumstances around than BAMSI. While we cannot get away from the vulnerabilities which stem from our national composition of many islands, we cannot sit idly by and not make significant strides towards reducing our dependence on food imports. Mr. Speaker, when the Progressive Liberal Party government, or the Progressive Liberal Party, campaigned for office, our bold statement in our Charter for Governance was, now is the time to lay the groundwork for a more healthy and secure nation. Prior to this government coming to office, 2 decades saw virtually no public sector investment in infrastructural upgrade, manpower development, and public-private sector partnership of food production. Agriculture was on the decline in terms of interest, acreage, and farmers. BAMSI represents tangible and meaningful steps, Mr. Speaker, towards realizing a long-held dream of food production. independence, and security for our country. It is mobilizing the core ideal of the Progressive Liberal Party that agriculture is an integral part of our sustainable economic development. BAMSI was and remains this government's step in the right direction to maximize our national potential and to materialize this goal. That is, Mr. Speaker, the bigger picture. But if we refine the focus to North Andros alone, Mr. Speaker, we are able to see the awakening of the proverbial sleeping giant. Local government administrator Ivan Ferguson reports that his office is bustling since the BAMSI project came to town. Government revenues have increased as more residents are applying for business licenses and building permits. Applications for building permits have in fact quadrupled. Residents are busy clearing land. They are building. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, Androsians are positioning themselves to take advantage of the economic benefits that BAMSI will bring. I'm advised, Mr. Speaker, that one is hard-pressed to find accommodations because everywhere is occupied, small hotels and apartments. Apartments that have been sitting unused for years have tenants, mostly contractors and their employees. Car rentals have outpaced anything that the area has ever seen. In fact, entrepreneurs have had to secure more rental franchises to meet the demand for transportation. Mr. Speaker, I'm also advised that the shipping industry is reaping major benefits, transporting goods and services directly and indirectly related to BAMSI. Airlift, particularly the air charter business, is equally as profitable with the movement of people attached to BAMSI. I am told that the Ministry of Tourism held a reception for winter residents of that area and that the attendance was the greatest ever, and invariably they all were excited about BAMSI. Mr. Speaker, the excitement about BAMSI is even more tangible among the locals. Store owners are having good sales. More restaurants are opening. Those that exist are taking in the largest sales ever. Farmers that are just about giving up on the industry have gone back to cultivating their farms. This, Mr. Speaker, is the big picture. The opposition went on a fishing expedition to BAMSI the other day. I wasn't fishing. What a production they made about their experience there. What they didn't talk about was the excellent workmanship that the contractors have displayed in their construction. They have not said that these men and women, all Androsians or rooted in Andros, are creating what will be the wonder of the Caribbean. When you go into these buildings, you see the work of ace contractors, men like Solomon Roberts, Bennett Knowles, Prince Mackey, Hugh Fowler, Cecil Marshall, Sidney Cargill, Brudnell Kelly, McGregor Russell, among others.
Call the names.
Not one word did they utter, Mr. Speaker.
Call the names.
Not one word, Mr. Speaker.
You're going to them to ask them for votes too, so keep going.
Not one word did they utter
Keep going.
about BAMSI having already
As people live in North Andros.
about BAMSI having already established
Keep going.
68 acres of banana,
They can run all the oil.
Papaya,
You go down there talking to
plantain,
people, you're talking.
peanut,
They can run all the oil.
coconut, and lime crop
Lani,
in the ground and moving the economy.
gloom and gloom.
Mr. Speaker, they are not interested. They are not interested in the fact, Mr. Speaker.
I want you.
They
Why
are
don't you-
not
why don't you come
interested in the
I
fact
want you to.
that harvesting has started
Members,
with banana,
members, bring your voices
banana
down.
yielding
Members? Huh? Members?
Come with who? Mr. Speaker, they are not interested in the fact that harvesting has started with banana yielding over 5,000 pounds per week. And papaya yielding 6,000 pounds per week. They're not interested in that, Mr. Speaker. These two products alone have generated revenue in the amount of approximately $7,500 weekly. When these crops have expanded in acreage and the additional crops introduced, the projected weekly revenue is expected to be about $52,000. But they're not interested in that. They have not told us, Mr. Speaker, about the land is being cleared to accelerate the crop production program, where 150 new crop areas, new acres crop, including banana, papaya, pineapple, and lime. They've not talked about the additional acreage for navel oranges, mangoes, avocado, and soursop. Mr. Speaker, I know they have not been listening for any good that this government can bring. No. So they missed the fact that an aggressive intercropping program is on the way to produce acres and acres of watermelon, cantaloupe, and honeydew melons. In total, Mr. Speaker, the area under crop cultivation by the end of this June will be 450 acres of crop, with 200 acres for the rotation cycles and 90 acres in inter and companion cropping. $650 acres will be fully occupied. Mr. Speaker, that is the big picture. I've not gone into the livestock, poultry, and other fisheries aspect of BAMSI, Mr. Speaker. And the excitement generated by this revolutionary project is already immeasurable. We have only just begun with BAMSI, and 5 farmers have already been granted licenses to produce under BAMSI label. These farmers are producing vegetables such as tomatoes, cabbage, onion, sweet pepper, and hot pepper. Again, Mr. Speaker, this is the big picture. We have only just begun, and there are 39 students enrolled at the Institute in various programs and skills training. There are also 50 Androsians fully employed at BAMSI. Mr. Speaker, that is the big picture. But, Mr. Speaker, I think it's Chuck Palahuniuk who once said that the trick to forgetting the big picture is to look at everything close up. So it is with BAMSI and the consequential position of the male dormitory that was gutted by fire. The work of an arsonist. The work, Mr. Speaker, as I said, of an arsonist. The political pundits and supporters now offer the distraction of chatter concerning the fire. The work of an arsonist. Notwithstanding, we are not distracted and we are not deterred. We will rebuild, and from the ashes of that fire, Mr. Speaker, at the hands of an arsonist, BAMSI is rising to continue our push forward to feeding ourselves. Mr. Speaker, I know that it is of paramount importance that I should give accurate and truthful information to Parliament, correcting any inadvertent error at the earliest opportunity. When I last spoke, my advice was that at the contract signing, the contractor for the male student dormitory at BAMSI had everything that was required to contract work with my ministry, including contractors' all-risk insurance. The files, Mr. Speaker, in relation to this contract was eventually provided to me on Monday, the 2nd of March, 2015. I have reviewed them, and the following details are now presented as verifiable facts. On the 30th of January 2014, the government approved construction for the BAMSI project and noted that the construction of the student dormitories, among other buildings, was critical to the Institute's opening for September of that year. Consequently, on the 6th of February 2014, my ministry issued a letter of intent to contract Mr. Audley Hanna, trading as Paradigm Construction, to build the male student dormitory for the base amount of $2.6 million. The contractor was notified that formal contract documents would be prepared and that mobilization payment would be processed as soon as the ministry was in receipt of the contractor's business license, all risk insurance, and national insurance compliance letter. On the 10th of February 2014, the contractor requested his 20% mobilization payment. The normal course of action provides that at mobilization, that is the first payment towards satisfaction of a contract, the following must be available. 1, a contract or letter of intent duly signed by the permanent secretary. 2, the original claim letter from the contractor requesting payment. The letter shall be duly signed by that contractor. 3, a copy of the bill of quantities, scope of works, schedule of works, which is part of the contract document. Next, the original contractor's all risk insurance, including public liability of not less than $1 million. Next, a copy of current business license. Next, current National Insurance Board compliance letter. And the original contractor's performance bond, if applicable. Mr. Speaker, the contract was duly executed on the 21st of February 2014 at North Andros. Mr. Speaker, there were several indicators that led me personally to examining the relevant file concerning the insurance of the male dormitory. I'm now in a position to say that the contractor provided all that he was required, save a certificate for all risk insurance. What the contractor did provide was only a quotation of cost from Royal Star Assurance for all risk insurance for a 6-month period from commencement of the project. It is noted that mobilization was issued thereafter. What the file does not tell me is who took the decision to advance the mobilization without the requisite insurance, what intervention, if any, was made to ensure that this requirement was met once identified, and why the contract, which has been substantially delayed, was allowed to continue without this critical requirement. Mr. Speaker, in the construction industry, large project contractors generally maintain some type of all-risk insurance, even when not engaged in any projects, so as to ensure that when an opportunity arises, he is ready for competition. Smaller contractors, on the other hand, are usually not able to afford continual insurance, as many of them live from project to project, and those projects may be few and far between. They therefore tend to engage insurance on a project-by-project basis. the projected length of a contract. Mr. Speaker, this government has historically been about giving those in need a hand up. However, there can be no plausible explanation for an administrative error such as that which has occurred in this case. I should not speculate that any agreement existed, but if there was an agreement that for the ministry to advance the premium to the insurance company from the contractor's mobilization payments, this should have been done. I mention this because I'm advised that this has been done in the past to assist contractors' qualification for contractual works. In this case, however, it was incumbent on the contractor, having been paid full mobilization, to ensure that the insurance premium, which was a mere $23,746.65, was paid immediately. If he had done so, a certificate of insurance would have been included on our file. From the outset, therefore, the contractor was in breach. This is where we are. Given the fact that the dormitory was not complete and has not been turned over to the government, by contract, the contractor stands fully liable for the construction outlay today, which totals $2.5 million approximately. My ministry is now making a determination as to how we will recover this loss from the contractor. Since the fire, two options have been determined. The first is to cut the building to its foundation and rebuild, given the fact that the fire tested the entrails of the building. The second option is total demolition to rebuild a new structure. Estimates in hand target the reconstruction cost at around $5.5 million. The increased cost takes into consideration the cost to reconfigure the units, which has now been recommended, from single to double occupancy, having regard to the demands for space since was opening, ordinary inflation, and VAT. Consequently, the net cost to government will be the cost of reconstruction less the expenditure for the structure destroyed by fire. That is to say, just under $3 million. Mr. Speaker, I'm constrained to call out the actions of technical officers whose duty it is to be good stewards of the people's money and to lessen government's exposure to potentially embarrassing situations. Given the experience of my technical team and the checks and balances of bureaucracy, there was no reason to suppose that such an administrative error would be missed for so long. Beyond that, the public fully and rightly expects all government officials to be above reproach in protecting the public's interests. These citizens, our constituents, depend on officials to act in the public good, to know their roles well, to do their jobs efficiently, and to be honest in their handling of public resources, avoiding even the opportunity for or the appearance of impropriety. The public service provides the remedies that should ordinarily flow from matters such as this, particularly how best to manage them and how best to learn from them. For my ministry, notwithstanding its difficulty, I should hope that this matter is taken as a learning tool. Bringing BAMSI to the point of service, as initially envisioned by the government, remains our top priority. Taking in the holistic challenge presented by the BAMSI project, my ministry has engaged the service of a project management firm and is in the process of engaging an employer's rep to guide this process to completion expeditiously. Mr. Speaker, while what has transpired is an avoidable error on the part of the ministry, I do not think that any reasonable person would find malicious intent. On the other hand, that cannot be said with respect to the arson, which, if proved, was criminally intended to deprive the Bahamian people of the full benefit and impact of a vision that is becoming a reality. But try as they may, Mr. Speaker, this government's visions and dreams and hard work towards realizing them will not be destroyed. BAMSI's dawn has been unveiled. We look forward to its reaching its full potential, contributing to the change that we envision for the Bahamas and the Bahamian people. As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, for the sake of transparency, I table copies of the following documents. Mr. Speaker, the contract for the construction of the male student dormitory for the Bahamas, for BAMSI, with Paradigm Construction. Okay. Thank you.
Order that the contract be brought up.
Mr. Speaker, mobilization payment certificate, routing sheet with its annexes. The annexes to this payment certificate, which is the routing sheet that incited the payment, includes letter of intent for the contract works, letter of acceptance from the contractor, letter from contractor requesting mobilization, business license for Paradigm Construction Company Limited, National Insurance Board letter of good standing, contractors all risk insurance quotation from Royal Star Assurance, architectural unit request for mobilization, and finally, so that's this doc, that's the annexes to the mobilization payment certificate I wish to lay on the table as well.
Order that the documents be brought up.
And finally, Mr. Speaker, a balance sheet for the male dormitory at BAMSI, indicating the balances and sums of contract from the commencement to the date of the fire.
Order that the documents be brought up.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You have to sign the communication.
Yeah.
Order that the communication be brought up, and order that the documents do lie on the table. Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Member for Central Grand Bahama, you rise.
Speaker, I rise on the point of order. I did not wish to interrupt the member during his presentation. Mr. Speaker, the Member of Parliament for Rumpke, Cat Island, and San Salvador, during his contribution to the mid-year budget debate, stated emphatically that the building was insured and that the insurance lapsed because the project went beyond the projected date of completion, and the contractor failed to pay the renewal premium. He has come here this morning, Mr. Speaker, and has admitted that the building was never insured. Mr. Speaker, we are not speaking about a layman. We're speaking about an attorney who is an officer of the court and has the distinction of being a Queen's Counsel. for him to have made the statement emphatically, as he did, that the building was insured and that the insurance lapsed, and to come here this morning and omit that the building was never insured, it is obvious that he has misled this House. He is not only a member of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, he is the Deputy Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. He spoke about the pertinent documents, the all risk insurance, a business license, and a national insurance compliance letter. These documents, policy and procedure, requires that these documents be attached to every stage payment. We heard this morning that some $2.5 million has been paid out. The procedure is that the project officer generates the originating request for payment. It is then quantified by a quantity surveyor. It is then signed off by the director of works, and the treasurer, by law, cannot draw a check unless this procedure has been followed. There has been many stage payments made from what we've heard this morning. We still do not have evidence of the insurance ever been taken out, ever. If fraudulent acts have been committed, and it would appear that it has, I believe that it requires a police investigation. Secondly, since the member has misled this House, he should do the honorable thing. Mr. Speaker, this is a sad day in the Parliament of the Bahamas.
Thank you. Thank you, honorable member. Member for Kalani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, as my colleague, the member here for Grand Bahama, had mentioned about the compliance letter for national insurance. Mr. Speaker, this is much more deeper than it appears. Our records would reflect that this same company, Paradigm, got a contract from the government in 2013 for $743,000, and they never kept the national insurance payment for its staff. In fact, Mr. Speaker, in September of 2013, only 4 members were paid for, and immediately after that, only 2 members were paid for. We need to know, how is it that a member who did not pay the national insurance premiums for its workers, how was it that they could have received a compliance letter? And our records also reflect, again, Mr. Speaker, that in addition to that, he still has not paid national insurance for its staff members on this project. So the compliance letter needs to be investigated because there's some fraudulent activity going on in that department, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Member for Cat Island, Rum, San Salvador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I'm happy that the member from Central Grand Bahama.
Central Grand Bahama.
Yeah, I'm happy that he alluded to my profession. I'm happy he did. And it appears as though he knows something about my profession as well. And what he would know about my profession is that lawyers act on instructions and advice. That's how they act. So, recognizing that.
Just like that $100 million you always spend on the road when
so, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy you said that. I know, I can get to my feet. And it appears as though, it appears to me.
You ain't account for that.
That the member is characterizing my statement as having been that I emphatically. You know, and that's the way he received what I had to say. But, Mr. Speaker, I indicated that my advice was, when I spoke, right, that's what my understanding, I spoke about my understanding at the time. That's the first point I made. The second point I made, I indicated that at the halftime, that I would, when I made my contribution halftime, that I would come back to Parliament and give a complete story, an update on the matter. And as I indicated in my opening today, I am fulfilling that commitment. When I spoke, I didn't speak having had all the facts. I indicated as well. That's what I said, what my advice was. I said that's what I was advised. Right? And if they were to read my statement as well, they'd know that I say several indicators caused me to personally examine the file. And that's what I did. Right? And that's what I did. And my comments today is as a result of what I saw on the file. Now, this red herring of fraudulent activities, again, I don't understand where that is going. And I would advise the minister, who was also Minister of Works, former Minister of Works, right? And I will not take the House down this path. But, what do you call it? Bad habits die hard. And I leave it like that. Bad habits die hard. He had a period of being the Minister of Work as well. But for the act of an arsonist,
Stick the pin right there.
That's all I say.
Arsonist.
Right? That's all I say. But for the act of an arsonist, the issue of this insurance would never have arisen. Would never have arisen.
And you notice they're talking about that.
Yeah, I know. But I also say, Mr. Speaker, and so the member ought to check to see what was occurring under his watch. All right? Whether or not. No. I'm not. No. But you see, Mr. Speaker, all I'm pointing out is that I just ask him. All I'm saying, bad habits, bad practices, they die hard. They die hard. I'll say no more about that. Now, insofar as this commentary about the contractor, and how many national insurance contributions he might have made, or how many employees he might have made. Mr. Speaker, all I could say to that is this, right? We rely on the information that's provided to us by national insurance. But suffice it to say that a contractor may have a subcontractor, and that subcontractor will have his employees to whom he is responsible to pay national insurance. So a general contractor may have maybe 4 employees, having subcontracted out the various aspects of his contract to other contractors, who will then be responsible for national insurance premiums. So it is not no red flag will be raised if it comes to my attention that, well, a contractor is only paying contributions for 5 or 6 workers when he may have 20 on the job, because it could have been a subcontractor. Right? And I think national insurance will be able to speak to that. So again, where the fraudulent activity come in? I mean, as I said, Mr. Speaker, bad habits, bad practices, they die hard.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for intervention. Right Honourable Member for Centerville.
I rise simply, Mr. Speaker, because the opposition had the member for Central Grand Bahama and the leader of the opposition make a brief comment. Mr. Speaker, the reason the communication was justified on the basis of the rules of the House. We run the risk of a debate evolving on a matter that the House provides by its own procedures and rules for any investigation to take place by a committee, the majority of which is represented by the opposition, the Public Accounts Committee. They have the power under the Public Accounts Committee, and that's why the House of Assembly provides for it. Not to sit here and cause a debate to get on that'll be controversial. And it will be controversial, Mr. Speaker, because I am deeply concerned about an environment that is created that led to somebody burning that place down, I believe. I don't want to get into it. The courts have that before them. And we have to be careful as leaders when we create public opinion that is interpreted by our supporters who may not be as discerning and disciplined as us. And that interpretation could manifest itself in violence being inflicted. I wish I could speak about something personally going on in my life as Prime Minister. I don't want to say about it now because it has a matter of national security. And why you see more police around me. But the point is, Mr. Speaker, there is a direct link between utterance in this House of Assembly and manifestation on the part of people who support us. And that's where we have to exercise a great deal of caution and care and responsibility. And maturity, quite right. Because our words, Mr. Speaker, are being interpreted by people who allow their own subjectivity and passion and feeling to drive them. Now, Mr. Speaker, I simply want to be able to say that it must be assumed that the minister responsible for works and deputy prime minister, who said he would come with the communication, he came. He presented it. The member for Central Grand Bahama made an incisive contribution in response. And that should be the end of it. If there is any other action to be taken, that action should be taken by a duly constituted committee of the House of Assembly that you have empowered, Mr. Speaker, with powers to send for persons and papers. And they would be able to cause anyone to come before them, answer any questions they ask, produce any documents they want, Mr. Speaker. If they feel there are discrepancies, inaccuracies, even fraudulent manifestations, they have the power to send for persons and papers, and they have the majority of the committee. It is that committee we used to expose one of the grandest display of profligacy, an uncontrolled expenditure on the part of the opposition when they were the government. We used it effectively when someone who held a deputy prime minister's position in their government was connected by shareholding to the company that got the contract. And they're on here talking about cronyism.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I think it's a fitting way to end this exchange. Before we move on, the chair will recognize the member as the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, the member for Lands.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Your brief response, and then the chair will move on.
I just want to answer the member for Centerville and the Prime Minister of the Bahamas. It is the intention of the Public Accounts Committee to request and to send for papers and contracts of BAMSI.
Very well.
All right? So it is the intentions, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Thank you, Honourable Member. And thank all Honourable Members. Members, that is over. We will move on to the business at hand. I am advised that we are on second reading and committal of the Immigration Amendment Bill, that there was one bill that has supplanted another. So I'm going to need the consent from the House to introduce a new bill in its stead before the debate commences. And do we have consent from the leader of the... Very well. I understand that it would be most appropriate for the leader of government business to make the request. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bain and Grandstand.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, as I advised you earlier, we would wish to withdraw the current bill and exchange, in order for us to remove one of the clauses that was in the current bill. I've had discussions with the leader of the opposition and the leader of opposition business who have consented to that procedure.
Very well.
So if the speaker would allow, I'd like to have the current immigration amendment bill withdrawn, and sorry? Novation? Novation, Mr. Speaker. I'll look it up.
I'm not going to agree to that because I'm not sure if that's parliamentary. This is the new bill?
Yes, sir.
The new bill. All right. Order that the new bill lie on the table and be distributed to members. And we have consent. Member for Central Grand Bahama.
It's always our responsibility to ensure that the business of this House runs smoothly, and as always, we are cooperating.
Thank you, honorable member.
As always.
We have agreement. As many for second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, sir. The the Reverend Dr. Philip Ramick, who is an elder statesman in Fox Hill, penned these words, which young children say every morning in school. I pledge my allegiance to the flag of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, one people, united in love and service. And so, Mr. Speaker, in rising to move this bill, I make that pledge at the start of this intervention because this bill is about the Bahamas, its identity, its security, its integrity. I just quoted him. Oh. And so, by the way, today I also pledge, in the words of Timothy Gibson, to excel. And so, Mr. Speaker, I pledge my allegiance to the flag, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, one people, united in love and service. Mr. Speaker, let me say something which is obvious. This is not North Korea. This is not North Korea. This is the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, an open, democratic, transparent society. An open, democratic, transparent society. There is nothing as intellectually compelling and interesting to me than the confluence of rational thought and Christian faith in one package. And I recall this prayer from the Reverend Malcolm Boyd, who is an Episcopalian priest who died last week, from his book, Talking with God Prayers, in his best-selling work in 1965 called Are You Running With Me, Jesus? And the prayer goes like this. It's morning, Jesus. I got to move fast. Got to get into the bathroom, wash up, grab a bite to eat, and run some more. Where am I running? You know these things I can't understand. It's not that I need you to have to tell me. What counts most is just that somebody knows, and it's you. That helps a lot. So I'll follow along, okay? But lead, Lord. Now I've got to run. Are you running with me, Jesus? Amen. Today's policy decisions are impatient of debate. And Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Blink, made the case that in the choices of decision-making between acting on instinct or deliberation as the two alternatives, the outcomes are broadly the same. And if anything, the balance lies in favor of acting on instinct. So if there's anything that 40 years of work in public policy in this country has taught me, and that is this, that the longer you take to roll out something, the more likely it is to get derailed. This is a society, in my view, that in some things you have to present it as a fait accompli. Oftentimes, results have to be imposed from the outside, as we recently saw in the OECD strictures, where they changed the way we do business in terms of banking. Mr. Speaker, there are many human beings in this country, human beings, that are waiting on this bill to help get their lives in order. Immigration is a blunt instrument. It is a policing action. But at the same time, it requires sensitivity and humanity. This country is often at extremes on this issue, with people polarized on one side of it or the next. The government, myself as the adjudicating authority, has to be strict but measured, stern but humane. So today is the time to act. We're never going to get it perfectly right, but we have to start. Many people forget that this policy started out last year when day after day, 100 at a time, were arriving from the south of us on rickety boats, swamping our country and its resources. The Bahamian people were fed up, and the government had to act. So this, Mr. Speaker, is about one thing and one thing alone: making our country secure, securing the borders, and putting Bahamians first. We need to act with dispatch and get this over with. It is simple, clear, and uncomplicated. And the message is this: everyone in the country must be documented to be here. Nothing more, nothing less. This means every man, woman, and child. I explained why I took the attitude I did and would not blink and will not blink. I talked about people being falsely portrayed as victims by people who have a political agenda, and I battled those folks with their political agenda. The other thing I want to make it plain at the outset, with due respect to him, is I am not Loftus Rogan. He's a good man in his time, but I am not him, and I'm not trying to do what he did. I cannot compare. But I said in the early stages of this that we would make a serious mistake of going soft and getting wobbly if we had blinked. We are successful because we did not blink. There was an attack on my personal reputation. One critic accusing me of running a gas chamber operation at the detention center at Carmichael Road. Another on his radio program told Haitians that they should not vote for the PLP because of this new policy. All a cacophony of untruths innuendos, and hatched up nonsense fed by enemies both at home and abroad to derail a policy that everyone should be documented to be in the country. And that's all it is. Fellow who was on his Creole radio show posted something on Facebook saying it was a note to Haitian children: do not vote PLP and start a revolution. And isn't it ironic, Mr. Speaker, that the policy which is designed to help the very people that they say need the help, the very people who need the help, people born in this country to non-national parents who have no documents of identity and no status up to the age of 18, will, under this legislation, be able to get some status. That's what this policy is designed in part to accomplish. And these people have been from day one just railing and ranting and carrying on and doing everything they can to block help for the very people they say they want to help. It is just astounding. Just astounding. But on the other hand, there were scores of letters and phone calls, and most importantly for me, the support of the National General Council of the Progressive Liberal Party. Full, constant, and unwavering support. And I want to thank them. But I wish to make it clear, Mr. Speaker, this is not about me. This is about the policy of the government of the Bahamas. The government of the Progressive Liberal Party. The government of the Right Honorable Member for Centerville. We have made the tough decision for immigration reform. We pledge to work for Bahamians first, as this bill and these policies, as they are designed, do just that. So it is my honor to move this bill, the Immigration Amendment Bill 2015. I so move, and in doing so, I wish to put this matter in context and explain some of the provisions of the bill. I hope the bill has the support of the House. This is a reforming statute. This is simply building on the 1967 Immigration Act, which itself was a compendium of a number of public policy initiatives dating back to the 19th century to deal with immigration in the Bahamas. The measures proposed are not complicated, they are simple, they're not sinister, and they are straightforward. This is about one thing and one thing alone: ensuring that everyone in the Bahamas has some document which shows that they have the right to live and work in the Bahamas. And all of this other stuff about targeting national groups and the allegations of abusing one group or the next did not arise when this legislation was designed and have been invented in the vivid imagination of the opponents of these simple measures. With respect, those are separate issues from this bill and what it seeks to do. We have a long and complex history on immigration and of immigration. And it's not my role or business to revisit any of that today. What I know is that in 1973, we got a constitution which defines citizens of the Bahamas in a particular way. The founding fathers of this country determined what citizenship would be. We have not changed that by law or by constitution since 1973. And we're now in the process of looking at the Constitution again with regard to citizenship issues. This will be the third time that I've been involved in that effort. The first time, I worked out of the Office of Prime Minister to map the campaign following the Darcy-Ryan decision, and the then Pindling administration sought to amend the Constitution to make it clearer who was responsible for granting citizenship of the Bahamas. That effort died in and around 1981. And there have been two efforts since then to amend the Constitution. And each time we come to deal with this issue of citizenship, the extremes are on both sides. So we've not changed the law. The result is that those who do not fall within that category defined as Bahamians in a legal sense. And if you want to see why I'm making this distinction, there are other senses in which you can be Bahamian. If you wish to find out about this, I did the Pindling lecture in 2004. The essay was called What It Means to Be Bahamian. And you can be Bahamian in a legal sense, or you could be Bahamian in the cultural or social context. But the Minister of Immigration is concerned with being Bahamian in the legal sense alone. However, I've said, and I say again, I'm not the Minister of History, and I'm not the Minister of Social Commentary. I'm the Minister of Immigration with a quasi-judicial function to carry out, and I try to do so without fear or favor. My position is that the Immigration Board and the government of the Bahamas Immigration Board with regard to work permits and permanent residence has the absolute right to say who can or cannot land in the Bahamas and who should be excluded from the Bahamas. Always, of course, this is subject to law. However, the law gives the board that right to say who can land in the Bahamas and who cannot land in the Bahamas. The question then is, what status should be granted to those who are not Bahamians in the legal sense to allow them to live here lawfully? In particular, there is a class of persons who had the right at their 18th birthday and before their 19th birthday to apply to be registered as a citizen of the Bahamas. That is that category of person who is born to non-Bahamian parents. The other category of concern is the children of Bahamians who are citizens of the Bahamas by virtue of Article 3.2 of the Constitution when read in conjunction with Article 8 of the Constitution. For convenience, I will call it the Sidney Poitier example. And my brother Matthew falls in this category. My brother Matthew was born in the United States. He got his citizenship because my father was born in the Bahamas prior to 1973. So the Constitution under Article 8 gives the right of my father to pass on the citizenship to my younger brother Matthew. But he cannot pass the citizenship, his Bahamian citizenship, on to his children if those children were born outside the Bahamas. So his oldest son, for example, was born in the United States, and he would have to, in order to claim Bahamian citizenship, his oldest son would have to register in the Bahamas as a citizen of the Bahamas. That's what Article 3.2 says. And Sidney Poitier has children who are in that same position. Now, some people in this position waited until they were adults to apply for citizenship of the Bahamas and found themselves in the invidious position of having to renounce their citizenship of origin in order to take on the citizenship of the Bahamas. If they had applied as children, they would not have had to have done so, but once you become an adult, you are called upon to renounce the citizenship of origin. Then the alternative to that is you could take on or apply for permanent residence with the right to work. Now, The law already contemplated that situation with regard to women. So the children of women in the Immigration Act who were born overseas can apply for permanent residence with the right to work, and there's a special category and fee for those children. But it does not make any allowance for men who have children who are Bahamian, who are born outside the country under Article 3.2. So that Sidney Poitier's daughters, for example, if they wanted to apply for permanent residence with the right to work, and they were granted permanent residence, the right to work, under the present law, they would have to pay $10,000 to get that permanent residence with the right to work. So we thought that it would be fair to these people to create an opening in the law which provides a price which is affordable for those individuals. And you will see when you look at the regulations that that price is now $250. So this bill will solve that problem for them by doing two things: creating the status of a resident belonger for them, or allowing them to get permanent residence with the right to work at the cost of $250. In amending the law, we are also conscious of the high level of illegal migration. Since the new administrative measures were introduced on the 1st of November, there's been a dramatic decrease in the number of boats being interdicted at sea. Now, no one wants to take credit for that, so I merely point it out. Some people suggest that it's really the weather. Since the weather's been bad, the boats have not been coming. But the fact is, since the 1st of November, there's been a dramatic decrease. I believe most people will remember the last one was probably on Christmas Day, when the 119 people arrived from the island of the Turtle in Cuba. In Haiti, in North Haiti. But since that time, we've not had any of those mass interdictions at sea. So it's either the weather or the policies or good fortune. But the fact is, we believe that the psychological climate has changed by sending out a signal to these folk: do not come, because we are serious about sending you back home. And the point we've made also, as the member for South Andros points out, is that the evidence suggests that people are paying anywhere between $1,500 a head to $5,000 US a head on these journeys. So while people are being portrayed as poor victims, this appears to be a sophisticated criminal enterprise which is designed for money making. And these policies are interrupting that enterprise. The policy has been the most popular policy of this government since it came to power in 2012. The public opinion measures on this are in the stratosphere. 85%. Not me, public domain. 85%. And it has the general support of the population. And I used as a measure for this, I said, the Progressive Liberal Party was most popular in 1968. And still, 40% of the population voted with the UBP. So this policy obtained the support. So when you get 85%,
You got UPP, you got everybody there.
that's what I'm saying. This policy, Mr. Speaker, obtained the support of the 3 political parties in the country, something not even the amendments for the rights of women was able to accomplish. This, therefore, is a highly popular policy, but also highly charged. The policy is for the greater good of our country. And as I said, a number of factors can account for the apparent decrease in the numbers. That is the weather. You can't also discount the work of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and their new boats. And of course, the work of the Department of Immigration. And the Director of Immigration and our policy advisor are both sitting in the gallery. So let me acknowledge them, Mr. Pratt and Mr. Nottage, and thank them for the work they've done. And let me also then extend my thanks to the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Department of Social Services, and the Ministry of Education for all their support and efforts during this period. But as the poet says, we have miles to go before we sleep. I'd just like to explain some provisions in the bill. There are 19 provisions in the bill. Clause 4 allows for the sanctions of the Act to apply across the board to all persons. Clause 4 allows for the sanctions of the Act to apply across the board to all persons. Clause 5 creates an immigration reserve. This will be patterned after the police reserve. It will allow volunteers to help the regular immigration department do its work. I've spoken before about the lack of manpower in the regular corps. Clause 6 merely repeats what is in the existing statute and places it in a different section of the substantive act. Clause 7 allows for the grant of permanent residence notwithstanding the death of a spouse, and Clause 8 allows in certain circumstances people who are divorced or separated to continue to have status in the Bahamas, particularly where there are children of the marriage. Clause 9 adds a new section for revocation of permanent residence consistent with the changes to the Act, so that if you remarry, you may lose your permanent residence obtained by virtue of marriage to a Bahamian and you are divorced or separated spouse. Clause 10 of the bill amends Section 19 to say that you must have some valid documentation if you are embarking on a journey outside the Bahamas. So they can't find you on a boat and you say, I'm headed to the States, but you have nothing which shows that you have a passport and a visa to go to the United States. And the point of the earlier amendment to take out the exception for permanent residents and Bahamians is to be sure that the bill applies even to Bahamians who are embarking on those journeys overseas without valid documentation which says, I have a right to go to the United States or to Britain or wherever it is you're headed. That becomes an offense. Clause 11 of the bill amends Section 29 of the Act to increase the penalty for working without a work permit to $10,000 or 5 years in jail. Clause 12 amends Section 30 of the Act to allow for spousal permit to be valid, notwithstanding the death or divorce or separation from the spouse, and to allow for another status after its expiry. So what the mischief here, as I understand it, is that, yes, that many times people, the marriages break down. Divorce takes place. Under the present provisions, if you have a spousal permit, as soon as that takes place, the spousal permit falls away. The wife has no status. They're children of the marriage. The children are with the wife. So what happens to the children? What happens to the wife? So what it's designed to do is to be able to provide some status so that until some other status is obtained. And then it also allows for, where that falls away, it allows for that wife or that former spouse in those circumstances to apply for another status. And there's the Act, as you saw previously, is amended to allow for the board to grant a status based on the former spouse or the fact that you were formally married in certain circumstances. I'm sorry? And the marriage has subsisted for 5 years. Now, Clause 13 invents what is called a resident belongers permit and is available in 3 circumstances. For people where the children of non-Bahamians are born in the Bahamas who reside in the Bahamas. So as you're born to non-Bahamians in the Bahamas and you're living here, you can apply for this status. That's A. B, the children of a Bahamian woman born to a foreign man outside the Bahamas. B, the children of a Bahamian woman born to a foreign man outside the Bahamas. And C, the children of a Bahamian father who is Bahamian by virtue of Article 3.2 or Article 8 of the Constitution. That's the example I gave earlier. Yes. Now, clauses 14 and 15 are tidying up provisions. Clause 16 creates a discretion for the minister to formulate a sector policy detailing the manner of and criteria for the exercise of the minister's discretion under the Act. This is meant to provide a more transparent process as to the circumstances under which various permits under the Act are granted. And this is borrowed from the provisions of the Telecommunications Act, which calls for a sector policy. And it's also occasioned by the fact that many times attorneys, people representing others who are applying, people themselves who are applying, want to know, well, how, if I apply, am I really eligible for this? How does the minister apply? How does the board apply its policies with regard to the law? So this is designed for the minister to be able to outline the circumstances, generally speaking, under which the board will exercise its authority. For example, you have this present provision where you can get what's called economic permanent residence by the investment in a home of $500,000. And the financial services sector has been talking to us about changing this policy to allow for various financial services products. So the idea is to be able to promulgate this in a sector policy which everybody will be able to see and understand. That clause also creates the offense of a fraudulent marriage, which is meant to deal with the rising number of complaints about marriages of convenience. Clause 17 creates the legal basis for regulating the detention center. And I will come back to the detention center after going through the provisions of the bill. Clause 18 is a tidying up exercise which makes the penalty applicable for Bahamians and permanent residents for assisting in an illegal landing. And Clause 19 creates a new offense of harboring an illegal person and makes the penalty $10,000 or 5 years. So those are the 19 provisions of the bill which we are seeking to get the support of the House on today. Now let me share with you a report which came to me dated the 9th of March, the subject of which was apprehension of illegal migrants. It said, Mr. Speaker, please be advised that the Royal Bahamas Defense Force patrol craft P-129 apprehended 9 foreign nationals, including 1 Bahamian, 1 Jamaican, 6 Dominicans, and 1 Lithuanian, around 10 a.m. this morning off West End, Grand Bahama, aboard an 18-foot vessel. The Defense Force vessel was alerted by Operation Bahamas Turks and Caicos, OPBAT, officials to a vessel in distress off West End. The 9 occupants were found aboard the vessel by Defense Force Marines and subsequently taken into custody. The apprehended persons were handed over to police and immigration authorities in West End for further investigation and processing. The Bahamian national is expected to be charged with human smuggling. Earlier on Sunday morning, the Defense Force vessel P-48, assisted 4 crew members aboard a 100-foot Haitian freighter that ran aground near, I'm not sure what the pronunciation of this is, Linard or Linard Key, southeast of Marsh Harbor, Abaco, around 8 a.m. that morning. No one was hurt during the incident, and the vessel was refloated without further incident. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to share that because this clearly shows the point I'm making about the reason why this policy is necessary. We have to know who is within our borders. We have 3 countries that surround us. Cuba to the west of us, the Turks and Caicos to the south of us, the United States to the north of us. And we have an obligation to our neighbors not to allow our territory to be used for smuggling people to those countries. That is in our national security interests, not to have our territory used as a staging ground for smuggling people into another country. I want to talk about the detention center. This is a vexing issue. The detention center is much maligned, and I will not add to it, save and except to say that the detention center continues to suffer from being under-resourced and poorly managed. I do not join with those who say those horrible things about the detention center without knowing firsthand what the issues are. The government has a report which made recommendations on its management, and the report and the need for urgent repair. And the government is fully aware of all that is required to get this detention center fixed. I need to say, children with mothers are no longer housed at the detention center. I repeat that. Children with mothers are no longer housed at the detention center. Food is prepared by the Department of Social Services. I'm advised that the food is nutritious, but what I understand the real complaint is that the type of food is not an acceptable diet for some of the detainees. There is no violation of the religious rights of detainees in this regard, as far as I am aware, which would, in my view, be a problem if that issue arose. But I'm told, for example, that the detainees, some of the detainees have objected to being fed grits. I wish to report, Mr. Speaker, that there are now 3 reported cases of chickenpox in the facility. There is a need for a proper isolation facility. And so one person, we checked this morning, one person is in isolation this morning. One person with chickenpox, I'm advised, has already been repatriated, but 2 other suspected cases are now, it's one in isolation, but there were 2 other suspected cases, one of which is now in isolation. The repatriation flights that should have gone out are now scheduled for tomorrow, and if they take place, that should relieve the numbers in the facility. The Public Health Department is au fait with the details and are managing the protocols to deal with the chickenpox cases. I'm advised that when the first case occurred, there was a vaccination effort to prevent the disease from spreading. The parliamentary secretary will monitor the process and report to me and I to this House as events unfold. I've constantly said that the answer to the detention center's woes is in part to move people out of that facility on a timely basis. Sometimes I wonder whether we've robbed the church or whether we are intent on being the Keystone Cops with regard to what is necessary to maintain that facility. But it's a work in progress, and we will continue to do the best we can with the resources which we have available to us. The government of the Bahamas does not condone or treat by policy anyone in an inhumane fashion. I've offered certain responsible non-governmental agencies the right to enter that facility at will and to work with those agencies to make any immediate improvements that are required to that facility. And this includes the opposition spokesman on foreign affairs. What I object to, however, is this doctrine of gotcha. And it's again that I say this is not North Korea, this is the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker, the ire of some people who are against the policy because of their ancestry, talking about voting against the PLP because of this policy. But here's what came from the other side of the debate. This letter came to me the day after the legislation was introduced in Parliament for the belongers permit. And I'm only pointing this out in case people don't know about the extreme sensitivity and how highly charged this matter is on both sides. Here's what the letter says. Dear Minister, I made the time to congratulate you when I thought you were on a path to finally address and stem the encroachment of illegal immigrants, Haitians in particular, into this country. I must convey my absolute disappointment and dismay at the recent communication regarding the belongers permit. Anson, Ali, Jetta Baptiste, Luby Georges, and their leader Fred Smith are so gleeful they can barely contain themselves. Bahamas pundit is right. For reasons known only to yourself and your party, you seek to open the floodgates to people who will overrun and destroy the Bahamas as we know it. If the Americans have shared with me the negative consequences for our country, they certainly have shared the same with you and others in your party. You have chosen overnight to devalue the Bahamian passport. Hubert Ingram also chose to dabble with Haitianizing the electorate with mass swearing-in sessions prior to the last election. Thousands of persons who had never voted PLP voted en masse in protest, and his newly minted citizens could not save them. Those of us who despise the trivialization of our citizenship will not take this lightly. We could not ever support giving this nation to another people. The last chargé d'affaires of the U.S. Embassy made it clear to me that the U.S. never encouraged giving citizenship to children of illegal immigrants born here, and they know why. That's the end of the letter. I'm not sure what you say to that, except this, Mr. Speaker. First of all, this policy has nothing to do with citizenship. This is not about citizenship. So that is absolutely wrong. Secondly, the fact is, all of the remedies are available in law today in the Immigration Act. All of them. So there's no new remedy here or no change in policy. This is only about facilitating legal migration to the Bahamas. What I said was this. We could have insisted, and I suppose we still can if the House doesn't agree with the act, that if you want residence in the Bahamas, that you have to pay the $1,000 a year fee. But anyone who is in this country now, born to non-national parents, who's over the age of 18, will have to pay $1,000 for a residence fee per year until they get citizenship or permanent residence with the right to work, but for the intervention of this legislation. So we could have left it as it is. The point is that faced with some difficult alternatives, you as an adjudicating authority have to look at things as dispassionately as you can. You understand what one side says, you understand what another side says. And as much as there is this temptation to accept all the adulation and accolades as people walk down Bay Street, you know that you have a responsibility to act for the greater good and the long-term interest of the country. I certainly disagreed vehemently with the irresponsible statements being made by those who purport to represent this dispossessed category in the country. and have made the most outrageous, slanderous, defamatory statements, generally about the government, me specifically, and then in aid and comfort of their effort, trying to tie me with them, which I reject absolutely. You know, don't put me in that same boat, because I'm not with you. When someone gets up on a public platform in this country and calls for a bloody revolution, the day you said that, the day he said it, the next day, I called him up. I said, are you going out of your mind? I don't care what policy you disagree with in this country. We not going there. We not going there. So I know this, and people say, oh, you know, you're taking this person, you're getting upset. When someone tells you run in a gas chamber, are you crazy? I mean, jeepers. If you want to disagree with a policy, you could certainly say it. And then come running up to me in the airport and says, well, you know, I may have misstated things a little bit, you know, misstated. So the point I'm making is I've presented both extremes here. And what I'm saying is that the government has to come down in the middle of this, because our responsibility is the peace and good order of the country. We obtained independence in 1973. And it has fallen to us, you know, the British would give you the impression, this is not my thought, Pericles Maler said this at George Stewart's funeral, that, you know, British packed up and left in 1973, and their narrative is it was all quite neat and nice package, and they handed off this wonderful country to us, and, you know, it says, go you into the future and do well. And I think their parting gift to us was $800,000 spent on building the police college. Said, happy birthday. And then went off to London. So up to that, the country was paying for itself, running itself anyway. So the point, though, that Pericles Malis made at this funeral was that they had the job, he and George Stewart. He was a young lawyer at the Attorney General's office. George Stewart was then worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And they had to create a Ministry of Foreign Affairs from scratch. You know, nothing left, no handover notes, no nothing. The British left. Same thing with this nation. We have to fill in the spaces. It's a living, breathing thing, the nation is. It's not static. So all of us have to fill in the spaces. And, you know, the Founding Fathers could not have thought of everything. And I've been with this issue. 1972, Darrell Roll is at in London, and he gives me a ride from the Dorchester Hotel, and he tells me, you know, look, we've put this provision in the Constitution, we've just agreed with this provision in the Constitution that's going to help resolve the illegal migration problem. And I couldn't have known as an 18-year-old in London in the back of that cab that in 2015 I'd be the one here trying to, you know, figure out where do we go next. You and him.
He was passing the baton right then.
He's passing the baton, you know, and he's one of the closest. Yeah, because my mom was his secretary, and, you know, so, yes, quite close. But what I'm saying is, it's a work in progress. We have to fill in the spaces, and that's what we're doing. And this is not, it's not a perfect solution. I don't pretend for any minute that this is a perfect solution. but we have to keep working on it. And the point I'm making, though, generally is that people should remain calm and rational in this debate. Calm and rational. Time is up for.
Member yields. Chair recognize the honourable member for Bain and Grandstown.
Speaker, we'd like to suspend the House until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
We have a second? Second. It's moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
Well, you were just hearing, if you're just tuning in, you were listening to the Immigration and Foreign Affairs Minister, the Honorable Fred Mitchell, who's the MP for Fox Hill. He was detailing some of the information that's in the Immigration Amendment Bill 2015. It has some 19 provisions in that bill, but he was also giving some extra commentary about how the immigration issue has been dividing people in the country, and how some people have been using the immigration issue for what he believes are their own personal or political positions. But we expect Minister Mitchell to continue with his contribution on this immigration amendment bill when we return at 3 p.m. But earlier, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Urban Development and Works, and of course the MP for Cat Island, Rum Cay, and San Salvador, the Honorable Philip Davis, made a contribution about BAMSI, the Bahamas Agricultural Marine Science Institute that's in Andros. That was recently, part of it burnt down due to arsonists. And he was saying really in his contribution that people are talking about the insurance issue, but there's a bigger picture that's coming out of BAMSI. And he explained how many people are working there, 50 people full time, and that their accommodations in the area in North Andros are pretty much all filled up right now due to the impact of BAMSI. But he then went on to give details about the insurance issue, which everyone has been talking about. And it came to pass that no insurance was actually available at the time at all for the property. And it appears that the contractor will have to be liable for at least $2.5 million since it hadn't been turned over to the government at that point, so the contractor was available for it. He said that total demolition is one option that they have, which could cost in excess of $5 million. But after his contribution, Central Grand Bahama MP Nico Grant took to the floor and said that Mr. Davis had misled Parliament and should do the honorable thing. And the opposition leader then joined him and said that, obviously that it appears that there is something fraudulent going on in the Ministry of Works, which caused the Deputy Prime Minister to respond to that, and also the Prime Minister to say some things which were very interesting. And he also made some suggestions about what was happening to him personally. And I'm sure you'll hear a lot more about that. But right now, we're going to take you to the House of Assembly directly and to Janaea Noel Ferguson, who I believe has some guests for us, so we can talk about today's proceedings in more depth. Janaea?
Thanks, Julian. We would have just heard from the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration, the Honorable Fred Mitchell, talking about the new immigration amendment bill. He brought up some of the provisions of the bill and explained how this plan will work out. He also stressed that although this bill is needed, the amendments rather to this bill is needed, he said that this is definitely an emotive bill that may cause some, tempers to flare, but he is stressing that we need to keep a calm, and he joins me now. Minister, why was that message so important for you to tell Bahamians, especially as this debate continues on the bill?
Well, immigration and citizenship, of course, are two emotional
things. People love the country, and they want the best for the country, and people want to defend the country. But we can do all of those things without being jingoistic or prejudiced and being calm, I think. So that's my view about this. This is about trying to design public policy for the greater good of the country, and not about trying to start any war with anybody. But obviously, if we are attacked, we have to defend ourselves, and we're in a position to do that. But I think there's no need to be offensive.
Now, one of the things you also stressed during your contribution was the fact that this amendment to the bill does not mean citizenship.
No.
And we have to make that very clear.
Yeah, no. This isn't about citizenship. This is about immigration status, and the fact that people are in this country who are not documented, and they need to be documented, and it's to be able to facilitate that.
Do we have any idea of the numbers? How many persons do we know would fall into that category?
I would guess there's several thousand. Who are born to non-nationals who don't have citizenship in the Bahamas, who can qualify for the status. But I think in the main, most people have been complying with the law in any event. The issue has really been, you have these extremists who've been making noise because they don't want to stop the flow of new people coming in here. And that's what this is designed to do, is to stop the flow of illegal migrants into the country.
And then you touched on concerns with the detention center. How does this new amendment impact what we do there?
Well, the detention center needs rules, and the rules have to say who has access to the center, its governance, what the rights are of detainees, what the rights are of officers, so on and so forth. And that's what this is designed to do, is to empower that. The rules are almost done, but we need the authority to promulgate the rules, and that's what this is doing.
Thank you so much, Minister. We also have joining us the MP for South Abaco, Mr. Edison Key. He's going to give his take on the bill. We know that Abaco is believed to have the highest concentration of undocumented persons. Mr. Key, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Just wanted to get your views on this bill, especially representing the Abaco constituency.
Well, the immigration bill now before the House, probably a prelude to the constitutional amendments that's coming up. And I think there's some very good points in the bill that are going to clear up a lot of the concerns with people who in here illegally, and the ones who, especially the ones who were born here under the Constitution, who could apply when they're 18. I've expressed myself on this before, and I think all of those people should be considered to be registered as Bahamians, because they know no other country. They were born here. They are Bahamian birth certificate, and I think this bill would allow that to be cleared up, and it would be a good thing for the country, because I put myself in that position, born in a country with a birth certificate that says I'm a citizen of that country. Not a citizen, but born there. And then I reached 18, and there's just no response, even though I applied. There's hundreds and hundreds of persons who applied and haven't received any response at all. And I think all of them should be considered at this time, and that would, otherwise we're going to have major problems in the Bahamas with these people down the road, because really
Do you see the evidence of that happening now, especially in your constituency?
No, I don't see any evidence of that happening, but I think those people live in hopes that this would happen, and I think this bill now could be the means to clear all of that up, and we'd have a much better country, you know.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate you. Now, we also heard from the Deputy Prime Minister, Philip Davis, this morning, confirming that the BAMSI building, that's the male dormitory of BAMSI, had not been properly insured. That is, he said that at the signing of that contract, it was believed that all of the documents was in place, but the ministry was only provided with a quote for the insurance of that building and not the actual insurance certificate. This, of course, prompted a response from members of the opposition who are now calling for a police investigation into that matter. Now, the House of Assembly resumes today at 3 o'clock as parliamentarians continue debate on the amendments to the immigration bill. We'll see you then. Thanks so much for joining us. Once again, I'm Janaea Noel Ferguson. Back to you in the studio, Julian.
Great, and thank you, Janaea. And as she says, we'll be back here at 3 p.m. with Kishla Adderley taking over then. And we expect the immigration minister to continue his contribution at that time. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you later.